Mother Seton needs little introduction to us here in Baltimore, as we know the profound impact she has had. I was reflecting this morning that after Archbishop John Carroll, our first bishop, she probably is the most influential figure in the history of the Church of Baltimore in terms of the mark left by her. I mean, certainly as the foundress of the Catholic school system, foundress of one of the first religious orders of women to serve in the United States, the Daughters of Charity. But to think of her influence not only here in Baltimore because she was our first saint, and that we had this saint who walked our streets in Baltimore. Doubt she ever made it up this way to Cockeysville. I'm guessing Cockeysville was still an untamed wilderness in 1808 when she made her first vows and founded the first school down in the city. But we think of the impact of her life and her ministry in starting Catholic education and thinking of generation upon generation that has been formed and touched by her witness. And it flows from what we see at work in the gospel today, that one disciple invites another to be a disciple, and so on and so on. And so Mother Seton was encouraged herself to become part of the church as she was first the recipient of charity of Catholics in Tuscany, in Italy, where she had gone with her husband who was ill. And it was there that her conversion started, because others who lived the faith modeled and gave that example to her, leading to her conversion, and then her religious profession, and inviting others to join her in that mission. And then they began teaching, and then that gets passed on from child to sibling, who grow up and raise their children. I mean, how many of us experience Catholic education because it was what was done in our own lives, as the faith is passed on in so many ways from parents to children and from one generation to the next. So it happened with Andrew leading Simon, and they go and they make more disciples, who go and make more disciples. And it's all because of our witness. In the Office of Readings today, in the Liturgy of the Hours, we read a text of a conference that Mother Seton gave to her community about what their call was to do. And it was simply to do God's will in the way God asked, because God was the one who was asking it. And she encouraged her sisters to always be at prayer, listening to the will of God, that their own interior life was but an extension of Christ's presence in their life, and always following that. And that becomes the witness, simply to do the will of God in the way God asks. And the way we do it is because we recognize that if God's asking, it's worth doing. So we give thanks today for Mother Seton's persistence, her ability to do God's will, as we saw her go through conversion in her life and changes in her life. She was raised Episcopalian, became Catholic. As a widow and a mother, still then took religious vows, formed a religious community, established a school in Baltimore City, and then felt called to go forth and went to the wilderness of Msgr. Still a bit of a wilderness today. Sorry to those who might be listening online if that offends anybody. As a former Emmitsburg resident myself, I can dig. But all these ways that she saw conversion and change and having to listen to God and discern God's will was an example and an inspiration of how it is that we follow, do the Lord's will, give witness that others might follow after. And it's in this way that the church is built up. And so we give thanks for the way in which God's grace is the fuel for all of this, because we simply give ourselves over and let the Lord lead us.